June 1985, 350 kilometers southeast of the city of Aturo, a pillar of fire burst out of the ground at a height of 200 meters. This was oil burning from one of the wells of the field. Within a year, about 3 million tons of oil burned out at the well. Local specialists, as well as oil workers from all over the Soviet Union, have been working to extinguish the fire for more than a year. The temperature around the well reached 1,500 degrees Celsius. The soil from heating turned into a glassy mass. The equipment melted. Flocks of dead migratory birds fell from the sky. The drilling rig built up from heating, so it was necessary to clean the well in order to close it. People wore protective suits, sweaters, whatever they could. But the temperature was so excruciating that the sand melted. The suits could not protect people. Everyone had burns. During the fire liquidation, the workers had to turn to the military for help. They provided a tank that fired non-combat rounds at the mouth of the field to clear it of molten metal structures. Later on, the foreigners watching the archive video were surprised. They asked, "Is this a tank?" I said, "Yes, it is." "So did you shoot with it?" I told them we did. It was a man-made disaster of a global scale. The fire was extinguished by heroic efforts only after 400 days. The Canadian company helped.
The Soviet Union had no experience of fighting with such a fountain of fire. We had to seek help from abroad.
The catastrophe caused great damage to the economy and ecology of the country, but no one expected that there would be a silver lining. The accident drew the attention of the world's oil companies to the colossal oil reserves of the giant field, Tengiz. The accident at the field revealed a number of difficulties in its development. The specialists realized that significant funds and technologies are needed for the further operation of Tengiz, since it had a high reservoir pressure and significant content of hydrogen sulfide. We've all been there. When hydrogen sulfide exploded for the first time, it all leaked to the surface of the earth. Hydrogen sulfide is a very dangerous substance for human health. When the wind rose, there was the village of Sarikamus on one side. On the other, there was the village of Embineft. People from these places worked there.
There were settlements around. Nearby was the Caspian Sea was a nature reserve. All this had to be protected.
In addition, hydrogen sulfide penetrates into the metal structure, and the metal after a while simply bursts under pressure. In order to operate the Tengiz field, corrosion-resistant pipes were needed, which were not produced in the Soviet Union.
There were no literature in USSR that would explain how to work with such a collector as in Tengiz or Kashagan.
Tengiz seemed to be biding its time when the most advanced technologies would come to Kazakhstan. This will happen soon with the gaining of independence. The supergiant Tengiz field. The depth of the wells is 5,700 meters. In height, it's like folding 57 Baitirek monuments. The thickness of the oil-bearing layer is 1,500 meters. The area of the deposit is so large that it would take 2 marathon distances to run around it. The recoverable reserves of the Tengiz and Korolevsky fields are estimated at more than 1 billion tons of oil. The total explored reserves are projected at 3 billion tons. The Tengiz field was discovered in 1979. The first well was drilled in 1981. It demonstrated massive oil reserves.
We had to build new plants for processing of oil and gas for the production of sulfur. This required huge funds. The production of the necessary equipment in the Soviet Union was not established. Therefore, it was decided to attract foreign investment to the country.
The Soviet Union began looking for partners. Moscow chose the American company Chevron. They even signed a protocol with an international giant on the creation of a joint venture. Back then, the oil industry was fully subordinate to Moscow, to the Ministry of the Oil Industry, while the Republic had no place in solving industry issues.
We had more than 140 large enterprises that were under Soviet command. They were directly subordinate to Moscow.
The dawn of the 1990s, the financial and political crisis, the breakup of economic ties among the countries of the former Soviet Union, low oil prices, the industry was on the brink of survival.
When all economic ties were destroyed, the enterprises stopped working. We didn't have money even to pay the wages.
The government worked like in Smolny, 24 hours. Social tension was observed in the regions. The young state had to build its economy from scratch to carry out political, legal, social, and economic reforms. The country needed currency, and since the republic had a great hydrocarbon potential, the bet was made on the oil and gas industry.
Each country is rich, first of all with its people, then with its geographic location, and of course its national resources.
Kazakhstan didn't have many finished products that could be exported. It can be grain or metals. But oil became a nice card because it is 100% high-value export product.
The oil industry has become the locomotive of the economy, as we say it now.
It was necessary to act immediately. Shortly before the collapse of the USSR, Nursultan Nazarbayev held a meeting with the leadership of Chevron in the United States. Nursultan Nazarbayev said that if the company wants to work at Tengiz, it needs to maintain contacts not with Moscow but directly with Kazakhstan. Chevron was going to receive 29%. This was the investor's condition he voiced at the negotiations in Almaty. But our head of state has unambiguously said to Chevron that they will receive no more than 19%, while Kazakhstan will get 81%. It was not a whim, but a statement made on the basis of the calculations of our specialists and consulting companies.
JP Morgan acted as our financial advisor when we worked on the deal with Chevron. We had a close and long-time working relationships with them. They did the calculation and showed us, while we had to learn everything on the go.
Nazarbayev's call to work directly with Kazakhstan had an effect on the leadership of the American company. The parties began to prepare for signing the agreement on the establishment of the Tengiz-Chevroil joint venture, which was designed for 40 years. Although questions about the distribution of profits remained unresolved, the negotiations dragged on. The major contracts we entered into were simply huge and were prepared in English. We had to translate and carefully study them.
An investor is a person with his personal money. He cannot give away money without knowing in whom he is investing.
It is clear that the costs incurred by the investor must be controlled. And back then we did not have strict control. The appropriate institutes and specialists were just emerging.
Я сидел напротив президента компании тогдашнего господина.
I sat across from the president of Chevron and argued with him about taxes. He said, "You have no laws, no specialists and technologists. What can we hope for?" I said, "I have only one argument. You must trust me."
Я говорю, у меня единственный аргумент. Вы должны поверить мне.
You know how our president can be persuasive and how quickly he can make friends. There is nothing left but to shake his hand and give him a hug.
The charisma of our president is well known. He can convince anyone. The Americans believed that our leader would do as he promised. Personal guarantees from the president were the first step. It must be followed by decisive action. The country needed government institutions and working laws.
In 1992, Nazarbayev established new ministries, including the Ministry of Energy and Fuel Resources. It united all the branches of the energy sector which had to be given life.
While other oil and gas neighbors of Kazakhstan were engaged in the preparation of one-time opaque agreements with investors, Kazakhstan promptly adopted the basic laws.
Laws on investment, laws on oil.
The government set up a working group to draft the law on oil. At that time, I had already become an official, but I had no idea about international treaties and contracts. And all of a sudden, I had to draft the law. Zygmunt Suleimanovich Karabalin, Leosad Karabekovich Kashubаев, Kasper Ivan Dmitrievich, Vatsalevsky Edgar Slavomirovich. These are people of different specialties. Transport worker, geologist, oil worker, state official. I also remember Bekbasinov, Balzhanov. They all participated in the development of the law on oil. We were accommodated in the third residence on Lenin Avenue in Almaty, and there we worked together with this group. We worked tirelessly. I remember there were no computers. We cut out the text, passed it with glue. Now probably people won't believe it actually happened, but this is how our independence began. And we had an extraordinary responsibility. Now our laws comply with all international norms. In many cases, they're even better. The president took upon himself the responsibility to personally sign and adopt the laws. He adopted 140 laws that allowed Kazakhstan to quickly move to a new state. In April 1993, Kazakhstan and Chevron settled all controversial issues and signed an agreement on the establishment of a joint venture. Today, everyone knows it under the TCO brand. It was also the largest deal for Americans since the early 1970s. In the first years of operation, TCO removes the technological problems of the existing facilities. The existing plant for the primary processing of oil and gas, built in 1991, was in need of repair and modernization. The development of the concept of full-scale exploration of the field began. There was a certain mindset at the time. These capitalists came to take everything. Almost everyone thought this way. When TCO was established, there were about 10 companies at Tengiz, and they were all state-owned. The partnership with Chevron brings impressive results. If in 1991 the field produced 1 million tons of oil, then in 1997 it was already 7 million tons. A project to expand bottlenecks was launched, and the joint venture included two more partners, ExxonMobil Corporation and the Russian-American joint venture Lukarko. By 2001, thanks to innovative approaches, the level of oil production had increased to 12 million tons. High-tech drill bits increased the drilling speed up to 8 times. Among the new wells is the one with a depth of 5,700 meters. When the joint venture was created, many issues were resolved without delay. Many things changed in a positive direction. Household issues, transport, food, and its quality, all this underwent positive changes. The staff felt comfortable. Working conditions were comfortable. Intensive withdrawal of oil from productive wells at Tengiz leads to a decrease in reservoir pressure. Because of this, the flow of oil decreases and the upper layers of the rock sink. It is necessary to increase the pressure in the formations to pump raw gas into them. Thus, a decision was made to build a second-generation plant and a raw gas injection plant. The technology is as follows. The mixed oil and gas produced are separated. Oil is purified from sulfur. Part of the raw gas is processed to obtain marketable products, propane and butane, and the other part is pumped back into the formation at very high pressure.
The challenge was in separating gas from oil. Then separate the gas from the hydrogen sulfide gas, and then separate sulfur from it. This technology appeared in Tengiz.
Chevron and the consortium lead a very competent work in the field. As a technician myself, I like it. The best world technologies, the best equipment, and advanced world experience were applied.
This allowed us to double the volume of oil produced.
In 2008, the Tengiz Development Expansion Project was completed. In 2010, the production volume reached almost 26 million tons of oil per year. The growth in the level of extraction of raw materials raised the question of the development of the pipeline system, since Kazakhstan does not have its own access to the world ocean.
The main goal identified by President Nazarbayev is to find export routes.
The country needed a new modern oil pipeline for the export of Tengiz oil. Negotiations began between Kazakhstan and the Russian Federation on the establishment of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium. In any case, we had to go overland through another country, whether it is to the left, to the right, up or down, and the main partner for us is Russia. Initiatives arose along a variety of routes and directions.
And among them were routes both to the Black Sea and to the Baltic Sea throughout the territory of Russia. There were routes throughout Iran to the Persian Gulf, through Azerbaijan, Turkey and Georgia to the Mediterranean Sea.
But the choice of Kazakhstan was nevertheless made in favor of the shortest route to the European market, through the territory of Russia.
The Russians expressed their interest in the project because most of the pipeline system went through Russia.
However, the ratification of the agreement on the establishment of the Cpc dragged on for years.
There were years of difficult relations with Russia, especially when we started talking about the Caspian Pipeline Consortium project.
Every smallest question was discussed for days. At some point, I realized that we can miss our interests. Then I went to our president with a note. He called me back and asked, "Is it so hard?" I said yes. Otherwise, I would not seek your help. We need your input because the negotiations have gone to the wrong place. Nazarbayev laughed and replied, "All right." He called Yeltsin and everything worked out. From the memoirs of Nursultan Nazarbayev, it took 6 years to overcome the differences on the Cpc. When Boris Yeltsin was in the Kremlin hospital, I went to see him. After 2 hours of conversation, the issue was resolved. In 1996, the Cpc Shareholders Agreement was signed. The consortium includes 11 shareholders, the government of the Republic of Kazakhstan and the Russian Federation, the Sultanate of Oman, and international oil companies.
8 companies, 3 countries. You can imagine how many parties are involved. Their interests must be consolidated.
3 years after the signing of the treaty, in 1999, the construction of the long-awaited oil pipeline began. The Cpc system, the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, is one of the largest oil transportation routes. It stretches from the Tengiz field, along the Caspian Sea, through the territory of Russia to the Black Sea, to the port of Novorossiysk. The oil pipeline runs through steppes, forests, mountains, underground and underwater. The total length of the highway is 1,510 kilometers. The Cpc main line is not just a pipe, as ordinary people might think, but a system of the most complex engineering structures. Let's imagine what kind of force is driving the oil inside the pipe. Of course, the pressure, but how is it created? For this, oil pumping stations have been built along the entire route, which make oil move at a speed of 1.5 meters per second.
The very profile of the oil pipeline from Tengiz to Black Sea made it possible to implement the first stage with the least number of pumping stations. This helped to quickly put the pipeline into operation.
Despite the fact that all oil is mixed in a single pipeline, its properties are different. To determine the system of mutual settlements between senders, CPC has created its own oil bank, in which a single quality standard has been developed.
This made it possible to maintain the quality of oil, and the quality of oil determines the price on the international market.
If the characteristics of raw materials are higher, then the supplier receives compensation. If it is lower, then he pays extra.
And Tengiz oil is light and has a certain premium in comparison with the Urals or Brent oil.
The pipeline itself is not just a pipe buried underground, but a complex device with sensors and warning systems.
There are automatic sensors that transmit information about the situation with the air environment to the central part. These machines are of the world standard. They work cohesively and transmit all the information.
In addition, the pipeline is constantly undergoing routine diagnostics by air and food patrols. CPC has become a competitor to the largest oil pipeline routes such as Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan. Managers and engineers gain invaluable work experience through unique innovations. The project became the key to the development of the entire Caspian region.
Thanks to this, the Tengiz field, Krashaganak and Kashagan were developed.
Kazakhstan gained the opportunity to enter the world market.
We sell oil on the open market at market prices and international quotes. The main direction is the Black Sea market. There, oil is bought by companies from the United States, the Netherlands and Japan. We hold a tender.
At the second stage of CPC development, taking into account the growing volumes of oil production, in 2011 it was decided to expand the throughput capacity. This was achieved by increasing the number of oil pumping stations. The expansion project increased the mechanical capacity of the CPC system from 28 million to 67 million tons per year. The cost of the project is over $5 billion. Since 2001, about 800 million tons of hydrocarbons have been supplied to world markets via the Tengiz-Novorossiysk system. It's worth noting that 12% of all CPC's costs were spent on environmental programs.
This is a sound and important project for Kazakhstan. It brings the country $4.5 million in income per day. We are currently working on a project to eliminate bottlenecks. In 2023, CPS capacity will be 80 million tons of oil. Of these, 72 million tons are oil from Kazakhstan.
The oil industry is always in need of new promising projects and investments. Therefore, back in 2016, a decision was made to further develop the Tengiz field. Two interdependent projects, capacity expansion and wellhead pressure management, are aimed at increasing oil production.
This project will allow us to increase the capacity of the plant. The third plant will proceed an additional 12 million tons of oil.
The projects imply the use of the most advanced technologies for the reinjection of all associated gas and sulfur. The end result will be marketable oil. The production plateau is expanding with additional injection and production wells. The global project involved 19 centers in 11 countries. Engineering works were carried out in Aturau in Almaty, as well as in the USA, Great Britain and India. Technologically complex modules were manufactured in South Korea. Gas turbine generators in Italy, and modular pipe racks were made in Kazakhstan. The equipment was delivered to the Caspian Sea, then through the sea channel directly to the unloading terminal, where a unique engineering system ensured the delivery of equipment for final assembly at the field. Currently, the main phase of construction and underground works has been completed. Part of the project will be launched at the end of 2022. It should be noted that following its corporate policy, TCO actively involves Kazakhstan enterprises in the design, procurement, and manufacture of equipment. To this end, 2,100 Kazakh companies took part in the preliminary selection, of which more than 600 received contracts. At the peak of construction, over 80,000 Kazakhstan citizens worked at the facilities of the third-generation plant inside the country. TCO is the largest taxpayer in the country. It brings huge revenues to the budget.
Just compare the situation with the 1990s, when the share of national labor force was only 50%. At the moment, we are already approaching the 90% bar. We almost fully satisfy the position with the national labor force. 85% of Kazakh citizens hold leadership positions.
Some of the specialists who worked well for TCO are now working on other Kazakhstan and international projects. A friend of mine once told me with surprise that when he flew from Dubai, half of the plane was occupied by Kazakh oil workers. Our fellow countrymen were coming back from the watch. They worked in Qatar, in the Emirates, in Oman. Then they fly to Dubai and then take a direct flight to Kazakhstan. One of those oil workers who hop on the international flights is the head of the TCO Transportation Group, Kairat Bataman. The acquisition of the best prices by employees and professional developments is one of the main strategies of the company.
In my career, I have received many certifications. We are trained every year. This is my diploma that I received in the Netherlands when I was studying within the Bolshak program. It was a very interesting course that I took at the University of Massachusetts in 2019. Our company time and again sent us to project management courses, which are very useful in my work.
Kairat did not choose his profession, it chose him, and he never regretted it. If you were born into a family of oil workers, then from childhood, you know that your whole life will be connected with this industry.
In my family, my grandparents were geologists in oil and gas industry.
TCO not only gave Kairat a job by vocation and opened up a big world in front of him, but also helped him find a spouse. This is how they like to joke in the Bataman family.
I met my wife at TCO. We have been married for 5 years. My wife works in the strategic planning department. And we have one daughter, she is 1.5 years old.
After internships abroad, there is always something to learn at home at TCO. English is a mandatory bare minimum in mastering professional skills. It is especially pleasant when it mixes with a native language.
Құрметті әріптестер, мен барлықтарыңызды көргеніме қуаныштымын. Және шетелдік әріптестерімізге түсінікті болу үшін пікірталасты ағылшын тілінде жалғастыруды ұсынамын. Colleagues, I'm actually very glad to share the experience from Kazakhstan in this conference today.
People who worked on the Tengiz project are sought after by various companies. And these are not only our specialists, but also foreign ones.
This is another positive thing, that there were foreign investors in Kazakhstan. First of all, from the very first days, they set high standards for Kazakh specialists, both in terms of knowledge of the language and proficiency in tools for analyzing various problems. Western companies offered very comfortable wages, and therefore our people began to intensively master foreign languages. They had good practical experience. They started working in companies with foreign capital. It is not an easy task to work in a field on a remote shift. For this, you need to have a strong-willed character. The strong-willed character was also useful to Kanat Sultanbekov, the design engineer of the TCO third-generation plant. It helped him to complete his master's degree in Texas, work in Mississippi for 5 years, and another 3 years in Australia. He speaks Kazakh and English not only at work, but also in his own home. After all, the Sultanbekov family lived abroad.
But if you fly over the sea, the water kind of rises up and splashes at you. And then you're kind of flying there. And sometimes you...
You're leaving on Monday, right? I forgot about that. Yeah.
To play musical instruments. This is no more difficult than overseeing the construction of the third-generation plant at Tengiz.
This project is very significant, it is important, interesting and complex. I'm glad that my Kazakh colleagues with whom I work meet the world standards. They work at the same professional level as my American colleagues in Mississippi or my colleagues in Australia.
Kanat says that if you wish, you can learn the most advanced technologies without leaving Kazakhstan. The TCO provides this opportunity.
The work there is carried out at international level. If an vice engineer starts his career at Tengiz, then he or she is trained in the method of work, project management methods that are applied all over the world.
The development of the Tengiz field has turned into a large-scale training base for industry specialists to acquire knowledge and new competencies. The experience gained extends to other sectors of the economy.
Oil has also boosted other industries. It has a positive impact on agriculture and civil construction. Many facilities in the country are funded thanks by hydrocarbon revenues.
TCO is one of the main taxpayers in Kazakhstan. It is engaged in investments in the improvement of the Atyrau region.
Our subsoil use contract provides for an article on social development of the region. In any project, we try to provide social support in the regions where we work.
Tengiz Chevroil spends a lot of money annually on solving social problems in various regions of the country. There are fine programs that demonstrate that making a profit is not the only concern the company has, that it also actively participates in the social life of Kazakhstan. The construction of residential complexes, hospitals, clinics, health and fitness centers, houses of culture, this is only a small part of social programs.
Construction of schools, kindergartens, sports grounds, sponsorship for the development of children's talents. Take, for example, the Cpc competition of talented children.
Within the framework of special programs, electricity distribution networks, heat supply systems, gasification of micro-districts, water treatment and water pipelines were built. 133 social infrastructure facilities and more than 50 social entrepreneurship projects were financed. Since 1993, the total amount of funding for social programs has exceeded $2 billion.
Cpc pays dividends to the Kazakh side today, just like the Tengiz project. But still, The effectiveness of projects should be assessed not only from the point of view of social support. Any project is primarily a business for a company. They must do their main job. The government receives benefits, tax revenues, and owns its share in the net cash flow. Therefore, the success of the project must be assessed in terms of economic benefits for the company's budget in general.
Наступило время, надо именно считать с точки зрения экономических выгод и бенефитов, да, в целом.
Production proceeded gradually. Oil was extracted and shipped steadily, and payments to the country's budget were received on a regular basis. Companies paid their duties on time.
Thanks to oil, we managed to create the National Fund, which is a stabilizing fund for our economy.
The budgetary resources that are allocated for social support of the population when the economy decreases are transfers from funds. The replenishment of the funds is a merit of the oilman, no matter what they say about the oil, that its time is over. Today, Tengiz provides 30% of the Republican oil production, 27 million tons of oil per year. Tax revenues from the project are more than $150 billion. $1.5 billion has been allocated for social and infrastructure projects. The volume of Kazakhstan's share is more than $38 billion. We started Tengiz 30 years ago. Projects for expansion of production, increase in production volumes. All this had a positive effect on the company itself, on the country's economy. There are prospects for the country's economy. There are also prospects for a joint venture. And I hope they will be continued. Today, experts do not agree on the future of the oil industry. On the one hand, mass environmental awareness stimulates the development of alternative energy. On the other hand, a sharp transition of the world economy to renewable energy sources will require a huge amount of funds.
Having large reserves of oil and gas, it's not profitable for Kazakhstan to switch to alternative energy. It is more expensive, and it would be wrong to follow the trends in this case. Instead, we need to invest in protecting the environment from gas and oil plants. Our major consumer, Europe, is not going to give up on oil and oil products. It just sets other conditions that we will need to follow.
Просто они ставят другие условия там. И как их достичь, это уже другой, как говорится, момент.
I think that a sharp decline in oil demand in the world will not happen. Of course, there is a trend towards this, and it will have an impact on global demand. But oil will seek other niches for its application. I think that the age of oil will continue. I cannot say for how long, but at least until 2050 and beyond. That's for sure.
2050 года это точно, значит, ничего кардинально на нефтяном рынке не изменится.
The Tengiz field occupies a special place in the 30-year history of Kazakhstan's independence. It marked the beginning of the transition of the domestic oil and gas complex at the disposal of the Republic and became not only the first field discovered in the country with huge reserves of hydrocarbons, but also one of the drivers for the development of the oil export system. Tengiz has come a long way and became the property of Kazakhstan, but its path still continues.